Before the season started, this guy had done the reporting to tell you, whoa, Kyrie Irving really does run the Nets with Kevin Durant. The details in his book were a little startling. The book is Can't Knock the Hustle: Inside the Season of Protest, Pandemic, and Progress with the Brooklyn Nets Superstars of Tomorrow. Matt Sullivan was really embedded in their lives and got an unusual look at this team troll. And so welcome in again, Matt. Thank you for being on with us. We've been talking today about how in blame culture and messy celebrity culture, the story that blows apart is more interesting than even the excellence. So I ask you, as the guy who wrote the book, why are the Nets so interesting?
I mean, if we run this back for a second, you know, the entire kind of franchise fail, it starts and ends with Kyrie Irving, who's one of the most exciting celebrities there is, even though he kind of denies being an entertainer, right? He is this kind of pro-player, anti-fan, pro-ego guy who denies being an entertainer at all. And so, you know, but if we just kind of run this back to his original sin of refusing vaccination, which is inherently, you know, a culture war into itself, you know, he's been saying the last couple of days, I didn't want to make it about me, didn't want to make it about me. But back in October, when he didn't get vaxxed, he said, it's what's best for me, right? And that hypocrisy is exactly what a narcissist in denial does. He is an anti-teammate fantasist, right? An anti-science oligarch, the Putin of point guards, right? He's Trumpian in his own way, and I think that's what attracts us to him, and what attracted me to him in writing this book was him recruiting KD and then him disappearing for like alternative medicine. And by the end of my book, he and KD were recruiting Harden together, right? Three celebrities, three-headed monster. And yet they might not have done that Harden deal if it weren't for Kyrie being such this, you know, ongoing liability. I mean, people forget that he straight up ghosted his team again in January 2021. Remember when he took that kind of mental, spiritual break, and the Nets brass was really pissed off. And then, you know, he got caught taking his mask off at a party. I mean, if you think about it, like even James Harden got sick of that level of celebrity. He's no stranger to taking it all off at the club himself, but like he's got this ego the size of a fucking Philly cheesesteak. But he got tired of Kyrie's narcissism, of the burning of the stage, which is great television, but Harden got very sick very quickly of Kyrie's decision not to get vaxxed. He told that to Nets officials, told it to his inner circle. This was Kyrie's third straight season. Literally, it's like a TV season of ghosting. And so, you know, I think the Nets went from being a team to someone, you know, to run by a guy in Kyrie who doesn't even understand the concept of a team. He's in this daily spiritual battle with understanding his own concept of himself. And, you know, Stugotz was talking the morning after Game 4 about how fans love the 82 games, the, you know, the continuity, the growth. I don't think Kyrie subscribes to that. I think he's simply just a man on an island rather than an entertainer.
Matt, that's an interesting point on James Harden, and knowing them the way you do, KD and Kyrie Irving, can you imagine a scenario where KD gets tired of Kyrie Irving and his antics?
Well, I mean, you got to realize KD made pretty clear to folks around the Nets organization by like mid-season that he thought James Harden was kind of a shade of his former physical self. But Kyrie has, despite all the low-key shade that former teammates have thrown at him over the years, he somehow managed to become an even like shadier person. I mean, you know, KD had to sign off on kicking out his alleged friend, his work friend, not really his off-the-court friend anymore, on, you know, not letting Kyrie play on the road or practice for a couple months because he's an anti-vaxxer. I mean, people claim that Kyrie is kind of a bad teammate, but he's a good friend. But Stugotz, like, what kind of friend is finally allowed to show up at the arena as a fan cheering on his colleagues and struts in the middle of a play, feet from the court, and steals all the attention? You know, you think Kyrie's friend Jaylen Brown, who despite getting sick of Kyrie's kind of locker room antics himself, has remained his at least intellectual peer, and by several accounts remains unvaccinated himself. You think Jaylen would pull this shit on his friends and teammates if Boston had required entertainers to get vaxxed? I don't think so. And just to pull back the curtain here a little more real quick, like, in the last year, Kyrie has betrayed his own friends, his own business partners. He's kicked out people from his life who have, you know, actual experience running personal brands, entourages, public relations, and he's replaced them with his cronies from high school. He called his own signature shoes from Nike, quote, trash. Remember that? Like, he left his own benefactor to act like he literally didn't exist. They didn't market his shoes at all. while Kyrie went and tried to kind of, behind closed doors, co-opt Kobe Bryant's whole Mamba brand as his own. And then he settles for making a line of t-shirts with his sister, the Instagram influencer. Kyrie has been making like NFTs instead of 3-pointers. He's been making, remember he made his stepmom, who was the VP of ad sales at BET, into his agent. I mean, Kyrie has seen the horizon of his flat earth, Stugotz, and sailed right off the edge. I'm not sure KD is his boy as much as he was at the beginning of this thing.
But isn't this just Kyrie thinking, okay, I'll take the LeBron model and I'll distort it. I'll enable my friends because I should be similar in power to LeBron James. I left him. We won a championship together. I'm the one that hit the shot that everyone remembers. I'll just go do it my way. And yes, of course, LeBron hired his friends, and I'm going to hire my family, and I'm going to take over the Nets organization. I'm going to bring Durant here, and I'm going to do it my way, and it's going to screw everything up.
Well, Dan, I know after Game 4, you said that Kyrie's whole "let's manage the franchise together" comment was just kind of the God's honest truth in terms of Kyrie signing up KD to empower superstars, play GM from the jump. But I think it cuts deeper than that, right? It makes me think back to before last season when Steve Nash was first taking on this role as kind of walking apologist for his fellow Hall of Famers. And Kyrie, in his infinite humility, he says, I think it was something like, I don't really see us having a head coach. KD could be a head coach. I could be a head coach. And it's that kind of delusion of grandeur that catches up with you, right? I mean, I think there was an ESPN story a few weeks back by Kevin Arnovitz, and the headline was something like, "Lessons from Brooklyn's scandal-filled season. Is the super team era over?" Which I think is pretty short-sighted, because super teams will exist as long as superstars do, right? Cultures, quote unquote, can still exist when superstars are surrounded by their friends. They can even play decent defense sometimes. It just takes, I think, a superstar's kind of self-determination to look at himself and decide basically not to be a huge asshole, right? It takes a coach's determination to not make excuses. Like, Dan, I'm sure you remember this when LeBron first got to Miami, and I guess this was kind of before memes, but he basically shoved Eric Spoelstra on the sideline. It went kind of viral, whatever viral was back then. But Spo once told me that he and that kind of OG big three didn't exactly agree on their culture or their strategy, and they worked things out, right? Spo told me that it didn't necessarily go how anybody planned it, but that's fine. It never does. And he told Braun and D. Wade and Bosch that I think he said something like the cavalry wasn't coming. And the Heat had their own, 3 horsemen of the apocalypse already. And this head coach, the head coach, he said that there was adversity and 10 times the volume of the outside noise, which is inherent to a super team, an inherently villainized super team. And Spo said to me that those things can get guys to know each other pretty quickly. Meanwhile, you take Steve Nash, right, who's a good coach, I think, but still out here saying that the guys on the Nets roster don't know each other and how they did not underperform because they had not really even played together. Well, I think to answer your question, Dan, that has a lot to do with something that was declared back in 2016 by Kobe Bryant. May he rest in peace. He was talking about that Cavs team before they won it all and how every team needs a lightning rod, about how LeBron was essentially too nice to be that guy, how maybe it was Kyrie, was his quote. Well, of course it was Kyrie. And I think that part of the Mamba mentality, that every super team needs an asshole, is not going to be the kind of winning legacy of the player empowerment movement. I think Mike said the other day with you guys that this is not player empowerment so much as kind of a sub-brand, as Kyrie Irving empowerment. And Kyrie Irving is a colossal asshole. He had plenty of cavalry come in and out, James Harden, for crying out loud. And still, this franchise of his own making is a colossal failure and not a circumstantial one.
And his fault more than Durant's, you would say?
I guess. I mean, KD is KD, right? I mean, he vacillates. He's moody by his own self-definition. He's out here on Twitter, obviously, the day after they lose. I think it's just kind of the way of player empowerment going wrong. It says something that they have Ben Simmons, that they have Steve Nash. And Steve and I worked together at Bleacher Report to develop a couple of streaming shows with his production company. And he's a genius like KD. I think they were savants who bonded. They used to play together. They hung out on the beach together when the Nets were supposedly going after Popovich. KD picked Nash all along. And I remember Steve would talk about this whole soliloquy about, the young basketball players, like roots and trees, and it was beautiful, really. But let me tell you, my kid is on the same kind of Sunday morning hoops team as Steve's son here in Brooklyn. And Steve Nash came in before the last game of the Nets regular season, sitting there in the bleachers of this little high school gym with toddlers running around. And he just looks so tired. And I think that's not his fault. That's not KD's fault. But at the same time, Steve and Kevin, they knew exactly what they were getting into, you know, between the melodrama and the COVID was setting in. And they probably knew that they were getting Harden like 6 months before he actually got traded, right? They wanted the player empowerment. They were asking for that. And so I think Steve, Kevin, they've had to do a lot of saving face, which is pretty typical of, you know, New York basketball. Usually it's James Dolan's fault, but like, I feel bad for Steve. I feel bad for Kevin wasting some talented years. I feel badly for any, you know, smart superstar level human beings who have to deal with a world controlled in any major part by Kyrie Irving. I mean, Mary J. Blige was getting through to this man better than Steve Nash and Kevin Durant. And she was sitting courtside with a fucking bottle of wine in her purse. It's still morning time here in New York, and I think Steve Nash and Kevin Durant are probably already at the bar smoking a joint or both.
Jessica is making a face that still, like 3 or 4 questions later, the Putin of point guards.
I mean, I know it's like alliteration, but that was quite a harsh turn of phrase.
The you have cut Kyrie Irving at in a way, saying he is a colossal asshole. I think a lot of people have arrived there with Kyrie Irving, but I also do wonder what's going on with Kyrie mentally. Just how healthy he is. I think of him almost instantaneously when I hear Adam Silver say my young players aren't happy.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that is probably too personal to get into on air that are whispered about in press boxes about his mental state, which, you know, he's been an advocate for mental health. He's been out here saying that. I think he's going through growing up. He's a young father with a kind of spaced out Instagram influencer wife who he has his own little world. That's okay. I think it's when you bring it into the group that it becomes difficult. And I think he and Ben Simmons are going to be an interesting pair going forward. I mean, I know a lot of people around the league kind of whisper or group chat about how Rich Paul, who's the agent for Ben and LeBron and Anthony Davis, sort of the, I don't know, consigliere of the player empowerment movement, how Rich is using this kind of mental health thing as, you know, like an unassailable excuse, right? Even though Ben's just too shook to play. But you got to remember that when Ben Simmons first arrived in Brooklyn, some of the very first words that Ben said to the New York media kind of echoed Kyrie. He was talking about his haters, and he said, they should be happy I'm smiling. That's real shit. I mean, I remember being at All-Star Weekend in Chicago kind of right before the pandemic hit. There's this big lunch banquet for players and their families. You got Chris Paul with his kids and lots of other families mingling about. And most of the other players are just kind of like hanging out with each other, doing their marketing stuff or whatever. And there's Ben Simmons sitting alone at this big table with his sister, just sort of staring off into space, like it was all too much for him or not nearly enough. I kind of couldn't tell, but I didn't feel bad for him. I think he was going through, I don't know, relationship issues with Kendall Jenner at the time or something. But I did wonder if he like even wanted to be a professional basketball player. I mean, Kyrie has said on KD's podcast or something that he wouldn't mind wandering off into the desert somewhere when he retires with a cloak over his afro and never come back. And sometimes I wonder if Ben Simmons is already there waiting for him. And I'm sure they'll be really, really fast friends like Kanye and Antonio Brown. Unless, you know, when Kyrie was saying after Game 4 that it was kind of cryptic. I don't know if he meant this, but he said that he thought a lot of the outside noise would seep in and that the Nets needed to be tougher mentally. I mean, maybe Kyrie is already signaling in public that he thinks Ben is soft. And then we've already got a whole nother soap opera brewing for next season already.
Well, let me ask you about that, because Shams reported, and I don't know what's true here and what isn't, but that Simmons told Brass that his mental block is the reason for the stress on his back. And I don't think you have to read code there to go right back to Matt. Is this guy the guy who's still afraid of shooting? Like, is he so torn up inside about whether he's a basketball player or not that he can't play in a game 3 or game 4 because he's afraid of welcoming back the anxiety that made him short circuit the last time we watched him play basketball.
Might be. I don't know how back and brain really work together, but I did notice Steve Nash going from kind of denial, we don't have a timetable, to it's up to Ben. And that is how the Nets and a lot of teams over the years have shifted from culture and performance science and all the nerds to do what the superstars say. And I think that battle, which when I was embedded with the Nets, I saw all the time. I saw the physios kind of backing down from the superstars and listening to them, and Kyrie going off to have his own herbal PBGB doctors and Honduran herbal supplements instead of surgery or whatever. But I think the performance team told KD that he couldn't play in the bubble, even though KD wanted to. And so he didn't play. And now we're at the point where these performance staffers are saying, Ben, you're ready to go. What's up? And I think that got the hopes up of teammates. And I didn't think Reggie Miller was wrong when he said, that's not a grown man move, and that'll be a push and pull. But I think the Nets franchise is pretty receptive to the mental ups and downs of its superstars, which is pretty obvious if they've been able to put up with Kyrie this fucking long.
All right, well, tell us then, before you get out of here, what do you regard as the most unusual things around Kyrie, or what might the audience find most interesting? Because you've arrived at a place, you did not speak of Kyrie this way the last few times that you were on with us. I would say that you are a little more respectful, less critical of Kyrie. You have soured on him recently.
I think the way that he handled the vaccine stuff was he was trying to be a martyr, and he said he was doing this as the voice of the people. It's so clear to me that that is a delusion in and of itself. Yes, he does great things for the community. So do a lot of basketball players. Yes, he is as real as he wants to be in post-game press conferences. But you talk to people who work the aisles and the hot dog stands here at Barclays Center. They might have risked losing their job, but they couldn't do that. They had to get the shot. Just like James Harden took one for the team, KD took one for the team. That Kyrie still stands on his high horse and says, "This isn't about me," but it was about him. This isn't about my shoes, but they're still paying his bills. I mean, he's just such a phony now in trying to be this heady guy. And there was a point where I thought this team would win a championship no matter what. They could get these kind of 5-finger 1-ring discount, the veterans for the mid-level exception, so that they can chase the hardware. I don't know how many ring chasers still want to join a cast that feels a lot more like Mean Girls than Winning Time. I mean, the Kyrie show has gone from really exciting to beyond train wreck, and I don't think it bodes well for next season at all.
Is he a hypocrite, or is he just inconsistent and young and possibly, battling or whatever, just battling through life, lost, searching? Like and I get how it is that you arrived there, but your tone is more judgmental than it was pre-vaccine. Is it because you've seen him from the inside? You've seen the results of this from the inside, how it infected the Nets?
I wasn't as close to him this season, and I was almost looking at it from a fan's perspective as how it devolved. And I remember being close to him, and he was very bad at clearly, succinctly articulating himself. It drove his team crazy. His manager couldn't stand it. And yet he claims to be so set in his ways, and so that he is behind closed doors that set in his ways, that he is the jerk in the locker room. And when I talk to former teammates, they just roll their eyes. It's not like, oh, Kyrie's a good dude, he's a beautiful player. They get, as detached as I've been, a season away from having to put up with him in a locker room, and they realize he was really a jerk all along. And, you hear that from a lot of beat writers who covered him in the Celtics and the Cavs, and I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to believe that my fellow Dookie was a really heady guy who was just kind of inarticulate or too rambling sometimes, but I don't think he is rambling. I think he is very set in his ways, and he's very selfish, and he often tries to claim the moral high ground. I don't know how on earth he claimed it this year, and maybe he'll turn a corner and take back that championship mentality and be a little more Bron, a little less Kobe asshole. But in terms of off the court stuff, my respect for him has gone way down.
A minute or less, explain to us the realest of truth as it regards everything that happened with Kyrie, Harden, and Durant. How it is that was extinguished that quickly.
Maybe James Harden was a little fat. I don't think the performance team or KD realized how out of shape he was, how much he really did like going to the strip club. And that wears on a team after a while, because even superstars kind of got to show up for the massage table, show up for practice. And Harden just wasn't doing any of that. Kevin Durant respects superstardom, but he also loved when Steve Kerr had everybody in the gym, had that championship mentality, did shoot around, before every big game. And Harden was not signing up for that. Things were vacillating in that KD moodiness where he was hurt and Kyrie wasn't around, and Harden had to be the guy to step up. And I'm not sure it's so much that Harden gave up on them that the Nets kind of couldn't stand it anymore.
That's crazy to say, is it not, Matt, given what they had already standed? Given what with Kyrie and Kevin Durant, when you say couldn't stand it anymore, good Lord. I just don't understand how that fuse burns that quickly, how it burns out that quickly. But it's different levels and definitions for professionalism, correct?
We live in Teflon days, Dan. It was Trump, it's Putin. Everything rolls off the shoulders of the giants here. And it says something. Superstars, celebrities can let everything happen to them and still continue to perform at a high level. I give the Nets a shot next year. They're just not going to be the odds-on favorites because they've taken every odd and fallen really far. So we'll see. They're certainly Teflon, and they're the most Trumpian and, yes, Putin-esque of any team out there for my money.
Always insightful, sir. Thank you for the inside look. It's not something that people are getting anywhere else. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you guys.
For those of you who want your football coverage around here, every year one of the bits at ESPN that we were always doing is me lamenting how much I hate that thing, the NFL draft, and it only grew larger and larger. And I'd complain about the NFL draft, and I would get bored by the NFL draft, and I would think the NFL draft is stupid and hope trafficking. But everybody wanted football, more football, and so that was the bit. But I really hate the NFL draft.
Why?
It's stupid.
Yes.
And it's good for 7 picks, and this is a bad draft year. However, my hatred for the NFL draft will not infect this network. Stugotz is doing plenty of stuff with Golick and Sims that will get you ready for the NFL draft, that will have some light and funny and good in it. And then Mike Golick Jr. is going to join us tomorrow from Vegas. He's got a new deal with DraftKings. So we will have some draft coverage for you over my dead body.
I would actually like to cape up on behalf of draft experts that often get told that they're morons. I actually think they have a remarkable success rate, because the number of reasons why an NFL draft pick can go wrong is manifold. Yes, you can watch a shed load of players on tape and think that in a vacuum, this player is going to be good at the next level. But they enter a world that is filled with so many factors that would make those players bad or make that not work, that it's actually fairly remarkable how often they do work. And how often most NFL, for a lot of first-round picks work. I actually think that the NFL draft business is in some ways way more predictive than it should be. That the number of first-round picks that should fail should be bigger, not smaller. And that these experts who are always putting together these mock drafts are actually, in my opinion, fairly good at their jobs, considering the lack of access of information that they have to the personalities and the interdynamics of locker rooms and stuff that should make it a lot worse.
First of all, manifold. Second of all, I don't know what you mean. A lot of these players have played on their college teams for 2 or more years. You get a good sense of someone's
But you
ability.
don't have enough of a sense of their competition. You don't have enough of a sense of how specific the scheme that they're operating is makes them good. You don't have a sense of their locker room dynamics. You don't have a sense for so much. That is the reason why these picks fail.
There are a lot of variables that go into being successful at football. I will say that first-round picks, by nature of the investment you've made, they get more opportunities to figure it out than most, and there are measurables that will tell you what physical gifts are and aren't. And while any number of things can derail the process, you are right that it is wildly unscientific, but also a little more scientific than we probably give it credit for, because there should be a bigger failure rate, because it's really hard to get to the top 1% of the top 1% of all the people who are fighting for the football dollars.
But the scouts and the coaches that do scout these players for the first round, they're getting paid a lot of money to make sure that the investment that their team's about to make is worthwhile. Like a lot more than people that we pay to investigate other things that are maybe going wrong with society. Like imagine if you put the manpower that goes into scouting your first round edge rusher into like figuring out what's wrong with Miami's infrastructure. Imagine if you spent that same amount of money towards that same goal. Like, we would be flying on hovercrafts into work every day.
Ricky Williams talks about that all the time. The idea that the military school for millionaires is so precise in football that he wishes that others in other workplaces knew what it was like to be dedicated and disciplined like that in order to get to a goal of greatness. That if we poured that kind of fuel onto anything of caring that was disciplined, we would get there and find ourselves in a...
Dan, we've got fireworks happening right now on a Doggy Wednesday. We will start in Memphis versus Minnesota, where Doggy exclaimed he made a layup when it came to Ja Morant's acrobatic game-winning layup. It was incredible. He said Ja is not Nate Tiny Archibald, to which Stephen A. Smith said, "Thank God, I thought you were going to say Bob Cousy."
Okay. So doing the hits, Ja Morant just had a layup. Okay. I did want to talk about Ian Eagle's call of that, because I thought it was just as good as the dunk. Not the layup, the dunk.
The bird.
Woody just made a disgusting noise.
Really?
Because of how much he loved the call.
He's so good at the oh.
He is so good.
Like that sound. He's so good at the jawbreaker.
Well, that's the thing he had, the jawbreaker. He met the moment because Ja Morant had the dunk of the postseason and maybe the dunk of the season. It was wildly violent and crazy, and he met the moment. And I thought Ian Eagle's call met that moment, which was a bit hard to meet when you've got
all you want. Like that's a dream for a broadcaster where like you leave that and just go, fucking nailed that. Like, get in there. Like he whatever the next commercial break was, there was a fist pump to himself, and he deserved to.
Yes, because
that shit was awesome.
Well, he had on the shelf the jawbreaker. Like he knew he's practiced that, has he not, Stugotz? Has he practiced
100%. He did not. He's great. I love him, but there's no like Woody would know best. There's no way he came up with that on the spot, right?
I think
you have to work on that. No.
I don't know. I think that's just like a pun you come up with. Maybe. I don't know.
I think he had it on the shelf and he was going to break it out. If he goes into that series, the thing is Ja's going to give you moments. You got to go meet him. You got to have something, because you're going to see in our athletic game somebody who has no right to be that violent dunking over monsters. And it's just like, you've got fast twitch muscle fiber that I don't understand. As Patrick Beverly is posting you up and saying too small, and you can dunk like that.
The ridiculous thing is on that dunk, that dunk in particular, he kept rising. Like every time it seemed like he had reached the peak of his leap, he kept going up.
There is something about a guy who is that small. He's tall, but that's small because he's playing on a court of giants, right? There is something about seeing that kind of guy go up, rise up on the big man, get to the rim, then kind of cock it back and throw it down. It was so much fun. He is so much fun to watch, man. God, I love Ja Morant.
He wasn't that great until the fourth quarter, and then...
That's when you have to be great, Dan. That's when the great ones are great.
After Karl Anthony Towns was putting a giant finger over his lips. Karl Anthony Towns is exceptional at basketball, and this is how it happens, Stugotz. And he's made to look a bit like a fool, right? Because whatever Jimmy Butler did to him, what he did to him, and now he's in interviews talking in a deeper bass, and he's a really great player.
Yes.
and you'd really like to build around him. And he's a young man. He's still under 25, correct?
I believe so, yeah. 25, 26. But I'm encouraged. Like, Dan, he had a good game last night. He was 7 of 15, 28 points, 12 rebounds, 3 steals, 2 blocks.
Box score, Stu.
I watched the game. I mean, I love watching Ja Morant. I really do. Like, I can't recall if it's Michael, Kobe, Ja Morant, like guys where you're just fixated on them and not really watching the rest of the game. And Ja Morant is one of those guys. But Towns was really good last night. And the point I was trying to make is, I'm still, even if the Timberwolves lose this series,
Roy doesn't believe you.
I don't believe that you love watching Ja Morant.
I do love watching.
He doesn't believe that you were watching
it's a
the
weird
game.
Thing. It's a weird thing to object to. I mean, it is.
He doesn't believe that you were watching. Do you believe that he was watching the game last night, or that it was indeed box score Stu? Do you believe
it is box score Stu? Because throughout the entire regular season and maybe most of the playoffs, you probably haven't watched Ja Morant.
No, but I've been saying he's the most exciting player in the NBA the entire season. I have been saying that.
How would you know if you haven't watched him?
Why are we doing this, whether I watch the game or not? They were down double digits heading into the fourth quarter. Ja, the best dunk I've ever seen in the postseason. He had a ridiculous layup to end the game. I mean,
but did you see the highlights or did you see the game?
I saw the highlight package. I mean,
okay, yeah. So the thing,
Roy's right. That's why I'm lashing out at him.
The thing that happened with Karl Anthony Towns last night is they have another big.
They rebounded him 53 to 42.
I know box score. We already covered the box score. Stu,
you had
part
to watch
of this.
the game to know that.
Okay, no, not really. You can just check the box score. There's no information you will be giving us that's not in the highlights or on the box score. So he doesn't love Ja Morant, and he didn't see any of last night except the highlights. However, Karl Anthony Towns, now a great player, because I do believe he's great. Punchline because of things that happened at the rim, because Ja Morant wins the game late after Minnesota did the thing at the end that you have to do. They had such a beautiful play right before Ja Morant took it from them. Minnesota in a series that's 2-2, two great young teams learning how to play basketball, like really young, great basketball teams. Fun to watch, super skilled. You got a 7-footer, you can win the three-point competition. At the end of the game, in a hostile environment, growing up 2-2, they got the pass you need to make. The great play call, corner, beautiful. All of it beautiful. They get the three-pointer. They tie the game. And then Ja steals it from them at the end. And those are the moments. Those are the moments where these things involve young people taking the sport from Kevin Durant and LeBron James and creating those moments that Ian Eagle rises up to meet.
The series is not over, obviously, that, you know, the T-Wolves could still win the series. I'm encouraged by how good the T-Wolves are and how young they are, because I think they're going to be good for a while. But it is interesting because Ja Morant, if they win this series, does have – we talked about the opportunity that Jason Tatum has to run through the East here. Ja Morant will have a chance to do this against the Golden State Warriors in the next round. Like, that's going to be fun to watch.
I don't think – I mean, I like Desmond Bane plenty. And I've seen Jackson get 25 fouls in 5 games. Like, they don't have enough for the Warriors. Ja Morant will be fun to run around out there. They don't have enough for that team.
Well, not in Ja's current condition, because off the back end of that remarkable dunk is, I saw Chiron before the game, Ja Morant saying, "I'm not myself. I am not playing like I have been all year," because he's coming off of an injury and he still doesn't feel 100% healthy. That dunk came at not 100% healthy. But he needs to be better if they're going to not only get beyond Minnesota, because Minnesota's like a couple plays away from winning this series already.
Yes.
Including last night. You mentioned Karl Anthony Towns being the punchline. For me, even though Anthony Edwards hits the big shot, he's trying to beat Ja Morant to the ball and get a steal off him instead of trying to stay in front of him. All of a sudden, Ja Morant's 2-on-1 at the rim with less than 3 seconds left. That was terrible defense by him.
I don't know if there's any staying in front of Ja Morant, though. Like, maybe you just go for broke.
Anthony Edwards, like Anthony Edwards can stay in front of Ja Morant.
Stugotz, the thing that Whittingham is pointing out there, and he's correct, no matter how much basketball changes with threes and everything else, the game winner at the buzzer isn't at the rim very often. Now, maybe Tatum gets it because, again, Kyrie and Durant break down. But the game winner, that's a hard shot to get when they're not going to call fouls and it's 5 guys desperate to suffocate you. Somebody's going to get blamed for the game winner at the rim. It can't be that easy.
It can't be Ja Morant is a superior athlete. It can't be that.
Oh, Dan, it's exciting. Doggy just said on First Take that he was shocked and appalled that Jimmy the Butler didn't play last night. He said if it was 2-2, he'd be playing. If
Wait
it
a
was
minute.
1-3,
Wait a minute.
Jimmy
Wait a
the
minute.
Butler.
Jimmy the Butler.
Who is Jimmy the Butler? You're making him Italian? What did he call him Jimmy the Butler?
No, that was me, Dano. That was me putting in a little sauce. But he did say...
Hold on, Tony. All right, I know you're in maximum performance mode. I heard before you turned your mic down, I heard you practicing your lines in the other room, muttering to yourself, and then you come out of the box roaring and give me a Jimmy the Butler. Slow down.
It's exciting, Dan. Sorry. So, I'll slow it down for you.
It's a big assignment.
Doggy said Larry Bird was lying on the ground like a corpse, and he played. He said Zeke played with a broken ankle, and then he screamed Willis Reed, to which Stephen A. Smith said, you can't just say Willis Reed. That was 50 years ago. Nobody knows who you're talking about.
Okay.
Willis the Reed.
All right. So that's where we are. Do you have any more information there? Or are you going to go back into the bunker and listen to some more? Or you've got some more.
Last thing I heard before I turned mute was Deebo Samuel has a porn star quarterback. More to report on that in a second.
Okay.
Why is he so obsessed with calling him porn star Jimmy? Like, it's so demeaning. He dated an adult film star. Why do we call him porn star Jimmy? Like, it's
Why
weird.
is it demeaning?
Okay.
It'd be empowering.
What does your wife do for a living, Billy?
She's a porn star.
Hell yeah.
Well, I wouldn't call you porn star Billy, so I guess that defeats the purpose of my argument. Dan, did you see what Desmond Bain said about the poster dunk from Ja Morant? Poor guy. Just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. I like Beasley, too. He's a good dude. He's going to see that on Twitter tomorrow.
How much is Tony punching himself in the face for Jimmy the Butler?
Damn it!